Chapter 13, 67, Triple Qi Retraction, Translator, Atlas Studios, Editor, Atlas Studios. After Duke Long said that, his aura changed abruptly. He had just forced Purple Mountain True Monarch back and caused Ying Wuxi's lead soul into Dream to be ineffective. His aura was overwhelming. He was like a giant dragon soaring into the sky. But now it was decreasing. Decrease was not an appropriate word. It was condensing and solidifying. His overwhelming aura earlier was condensing now. In a few breaths' time, Duke Long's shocking aura was completely concealed. He was like a deep abyss, unfathomable and mysterious. Purple Mountain True Monarch acted like he was facing a strong foe. He could sense that Duke Long in this condition was much more dangerous than Duke Long with overwhelming aura. Roar! Duke Long opened his mouth and roared. Next, he vanished entirely on the spot. Oh no! Purple Mountain True Monarch's heart sank. Duke Long was doing the same thing again. He had once used this method to teleport to Purple Mountain True Monarch and use chaotic dragon fists, suppressing Purple Mountain True Monarch. Ordinary Gu immortals would not be able to react even if they knew about Duke Long's intention. But Purple Mountain True Monarch was different. He cultivated wisdom path. He could think rapidly. Almost at the same time as Duke Long roared, Purple Mountain True Monarch finished thinking and reacted. In their earlier combat, Purple Mountain True Monarch had seen through the secret of Duke Long's teleportation. At this moment, he used the same method again, eradicating the sound of the dragon's roar around him. Indeed, at the next moment, Duke Long stopped moving. He reappeared in front of Purple Mountain True Monarch. But this time, he did not succeed in getting close. He was still several hundred steps away from Purple Mountain True Monarch. But to Duke Long, this was enough distance. Human Qi Retraction! He shouted, waving at Purple Mountain True Monarch. His movement was very ordinary, like a friend waving to another friend. But Purple Mountain True Monarch suffered a huge blow. A huge amount of human qi gushed out of his body and flew towards Duke Long uncontrollably. In the blink of an eye, it entered Duke Long's palm and vanished. After losing such a huge amount of human qi, Purple Mountain True Monarch's eye socket sank in, his expression turned pale, and his bright purple hair became dull. He felt an intense feeling of weakness in his head and throughout his entire body. Deep within Purple Mountain True Monarch's eyes, a mysterious light of shock could be seen. When he heard Duke Long shout, he thought of a famous Qi Path killer move, Triple Qi Retraction. This killer move was created by primordial origin Immortal Venerable. It had two very well-known traits. The first was that it was very difficult to learn. This killer move was incredibly complex and used a lot of Gu worms. They were used interchangeably with countless steps. Even Wisdom Path Gu immortals would have a headache in attempting it. The second was that the risks were huge. Because this killer move was very complex, when Gu immortals used it and made a mistake, the huge backlash would be inflicted on them. If the killer move succeeded and could not hit the enemy, this killer move would return and harm the user. Triple Qi Retraction had incredibly terrifying power. The explanation started at the process of immortal ascension. When humans underwent immortal ascension, there were three qi involved: heaven qi, earth qi, and human qi. When Gu masters cultivate from rank 1 to rank 5, they would accumulate human qi in this process. When they undergo ascension, they would take in heaven and earth qi. The three qi would become one, and the Gu master would concentrate in controlling them, tossing their vital Gu in and creating the immortal aperture through an explosion. The more human qi the Gu master had, the more heaven and earth qi they would be able to fuse, and the higher the grade of the immortal aperture they would get. Normally speaking, the 10 extreme physiques meant incredibly abundant human qi, far beyond normal people. Or perhaps a Gu master could make accumulations by themselves, regardless of what path. As long as one had Grandmaster attainment level, their human qi would be very abundant. After creating the immortal aperture, be it cultivation or managing the immortal aperture, Gu immortals had to keep a balance between the three qi: heaven qi, earth qi, human qi. Not one of the three could be lacking and break the balance. Like Fang Yuan, After getting a secluded domain of heaven and earth like reverse flow river, the heaven and earth Qi expenditure of the sovereign immortal aperture became extremely high. Thus he had to place his immortal aperture often to take in heaven and earth Qi of the outside world, to replenish himself and maintain balance. Regarding the three Qi, no matter which Gu immortal or venerable, they could not be careless about it. In the world of the five regions, heaven and earth Qi varied. Gu immortals who were not native took in foreign heaven and earth Qi. Their immortal apertures would suffer great losses. Even though they could do that in an emergency situation, it could not happen a lot of times. When Gu immortals die, blessed lands would form. For example, in Luopo Valley, many central continent Gu immortals died in the battlefield. Their immortal apertures became blessed lands in northern plains. But because they took in heaven and earth Qi of another region, the foundation and resources inside the blessed lands were greatly damaged. All of these explanations serve to prove a point. Heaven, earth, and human Qi. They were incredibly important to the immortal aperture and Gu immortals. Any imbalance would cause great damage to the immortal aperture. And this immortal killer move, triple Qi retraction, targeted this point. It directly attacked the foundation of the immortal aperture. It was the combination of a consecutive move and variation move. Thus, the Gu immortal who used this killer move had to be extremely skilled. Triple Qi retraction had three styles. The first style, human Qi retraction. After the target was hit, they would lose a lot of human Qi, their foundation would fall. Of course, if the target had no human Qi, like a desolate beast, this move would have no effect. The second style, earth Qi retraction. If hit, the Gu immortal's immortal aperture would be drained of earth Qi. With a severe loss of earth Qi, the three Qi would completely be out of balance. The immortal aperture would be in grave danger. The third style, heaven Qi retraction. This would extract heaven Qi. If a person was hit by all three moves, their immortal aperture would break apart instantly. Gotin's Purple Mountain. True monarch retreated. He was already hit by human Qi retraction. If he was hit by earth Qi retraction too, the disadvantage would be too severe. Even though Purple Mountain True Monarch knew about this move, this was his first time seeing it. He could not see through it in this short period. This move was too complex. The more complex a move was, even though it was more difficult to use in battle, it was also harder for opponents to unravel. After all, everything had advantages and disadvantages. Purple Mountain. True Monarch could not resolve it. He could only use his methods as he created countless clones. At once, hundreds of Purple Mountain True Monarchs flew out randomly. At the same time, his main body vanished. Triple Qi retraction was powerful, but if it could not hit, it was useless. However, Duke Long was unmoved. He was completely prepared for Purple Mountain True Monarch's response. Next, he laughed coldly as his voice spread throughout the battlefield, even though he was not loud. "It is too late, Purple Mountain True Monarch. You were hit by human Qi retraction. There is no way for you to dodge the next two styles. You can only endure it. Come, Earth Qi retraction." Duke Long paused before waving again. He was not trying to deceive him. Duke Long's waving motion was not in the right direction, and he did not make any investigations. He had no idea where Purple Mountain True Monarch was now, but he was still hit instantly. Purple Mountain True Monarch was greatly shocked. A vast amount of Earth Qi flew out of his immortal aperture, raging on like a storm towards Duke Long's palm, before vanishing without a trace. From Purple Mountain. True Monarch's immortal aperture was greatly damaged. His foundations were crippled, and his three Qi had lost balance long ago. His immortal aperture was going to break apart in a few breaths' time. At this moment, one final choice was presented to Purple Mountain True Monarch. Placing his aperture here. This way, he could take in heaven and earth Qi to regain balance. But Purple Mountain True Monarch gave up on this option immediately. This was a horrible idea. Once Purple Mountain True Monarch placed his aperture, his main body would be stuck in his immortal aperture. He would leave the battlefield immediately and lose all initiative. And most importantly, the immortal aperture could only take in heaven and earth Qi by opening the entrance. A passage was necessary, and outside, Duke Long was waiting for him. If this immortal aperture's entrance opened, Duke Long would charge in and easily deal great damage to the immortal aperture. Furthermore, he could fight or retreat at will, while Purple Mountain True Monarch would be trapped inside his immortal aperture. Even if I placed my aperture and replenished my Earth Qi, the balance was long since lost due to my lack of human Qi. I do not have the human path methods needed to replenish human Qi. I can only buy large numbers of humans or variant humans. Countless thoughts flashed inside Purple Mountain True Monarch's mind. In a short time, he made his choice. He stretched out his arm and grabbed at his stomach before an eerie purple light shined in his hand as his hand pulled away from his stomach slowly. With his movement, the immortal aperture was taken out. Seeing this, Fang Yuan felt a familiar feeling in his mind. He thought of Blazing Heaven Demoness. Blazing Heaven. Demoness had a fire path method that could take someone else's immortal aperture. This move left a deep impression on Fang Yuan. Now, how does Purple Mountain True Monarch know this? Fang Yuan was a little puzzled, but he soon understood. Blazing Heaven. Demoness was a member of Zombie Alliance to begin with, and Heilu Land was firmly controlled by Shadow Sect. It was not strange for Purple Mountain True Monarch to know this method. All the paths in the world, with a deep enough attainment, could mimic other paths and achieve their effects. Purple Mountain. True Monarch's move was evidently a wisdom path method. It could also be that he created it himself, and it had nothing to do with Blazing Heaven Demoness. Purple Mountain. True Monarch took out his immortal aperture and placed it in the outside world. The immortal aperture's entrance opened and began to take in Earth Qi. But this grotto heaven had little hope of salvation. Even if the Earth Qi was regained, human Qi was too lacking. Seeing Purple Mountain. True Monarch's resolution, Duke Long was slightly shocked. A look of admiration flashed on his face for a moment.